Good afternoon and welcome to the Brownfield's Weekly Livestock Market Update. I'm John Perkins in for Megan Grebner, and we are joined by the University of Missouri livestock economist Scott Brown. Scott, how you doing on this Friday?
I'm doing great, John. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And Scott, we got a lot to talk about here today, but let's go ahead and kick things off with the performance in the wholesale meat markets this week. Some positive developments for both beef and pork.
Yeah, absolutely. So really strong week when you look at those markets. You start on the beef side, another 5 cents a pound increase in that choice box beef price this week relative to a week ago. Those are the kind of moves we'd like to see as we want to talk about higher cattle prices moving forward. It continues a trend of pushing that choice box beef price slightly above where we were a year ago at this time. I think all of that good news. And when you look at the components of that choice box beef price, we were up across the board, but loins were up strong this week, kind of leading the way, if you will, and in that overall choice box beef price, even on the pork side. So we've talked a lot this year already about that pork cutout value that's been moving down as we go through the year. We gained almost 3 cents this week with, again, strength across the board and all those components in that pork cutout value, and got some strength in bellies back this week. So all of that's good news. We still have work to do in that pork cutout value because it is still 12 cents below where we were a year ago at this time.
All right, and Scott, and also on Friday, we had the USDA's cattle on feed numbers, did show placements declining, came in pretty close to expectations overall. What do these numbers tell you for the cattle markets going forward?
Yeah, so we are coming in pretty close to pre-report estimates across the board, whether you look at on feed February 1 or you look at placements, they came in pretty close to where we thought. So placements are down in terms of what happened in January. We came in at 94.7 relative to a year ago. I still worry. We got some calves that we have to deal with as we get through the year, and we'll wait and see where that goes. I guess one of the things that, I saw, we continue this trend of a larger percentage of those cattle on feed are heifers, suggesting to me that although we were up in terms of that January 1 beef cow number for this year, that might be the last year we're up, given just the increase in the percentage of those cattle that are heifers.
And that's how many months in a row now the placements have been down?
So that's now I don't know, 3 or 4 months in a row that we've actually been down, I believe, on placements, and so we're going the right direction now. I worry that we're going to start this window where we got more calves coming. When you look back at the cattle report that we got, we certainly know we had a lot of calves sitting out there on wheat pasture that have to be placed at some point in time. So we may still have some cattle to deal with as we go through the year. And I keep saying the second half of this year, to me, feeder cattle prices could come under pressure as a result of all that.
Okay, and speaking of price projections, new supply and demand estimates were out from the USDA on Friday as well. What's your takeaway from the livestock and meat side of things?
So the first thing that jumps out to me, John, as you look month to month about what USDA is saying for 2019, they continue to cut the growth and domestic availability of meat generally. And for me, that then's a positive from a price standpoint. They trimmed 0.2 of a pound off of per cap consumption out of this report. So I keep saying that's a nice move if we keep shrinking the projected supply growth. And that comes in the face of actually what were lower pork net exports out of this report as well. That, so they increased that fed cattle price by $1 this month as well. So it just tells me that as you get this S&U a little tighter, we may see a little better price strength than we would have thought earlier.
Okay, and then we also got some 2018 trade data recently that indicates a record year for beef exports.
Yeah, absolutely. So really strong year, and part of the reason why I think cattle prices ended up where they did in 2018, a 7% increase in beef exports, exceeding the 2011 record, certainly was good news for the beef industry. And when you look at it in terms of the value side of that equation, it was a 15% increase in the value of beef exports. So we were moving some of the higher quality stuff. Just really good news on the beef side. But even on the pork side, we talked a lot about the tariffs that pork faces in critical markets and what that meant in terms of the ability to export pork out of the United States. We only fell 0.5% in terms of total pork exports when we look back at 2018. That might be a good indication of just how strong things were despite those tariffs that were put in place.
All right, and then Scott, a lot of those demand factors carrying over from 2018 into 2019. And while we're only a couple of months in, USDA has a fairly strong farm income projection for this year.
That's correct. So we got a release this week from the Economic Research Service. The one of the things that jumped out to me is that they're suggesting livestock cash receipts will be up $4.6 billion this year relative to 2018. That's a really nice growth. Cattle kind of lead the way there in terms of the increase, but perhaps the signal that we're going to see some stronger prices, perhaps, and at least when you look at the receipts as a whole. We're talking about additional cash receipts probably needed in what's been more of a downturn of late, especially relative to some of the records we set back in 2014.
All right, then, Scott, we've got more important numbers coming out next week. What are you keeping an eye out for?
Yep. So next week we're going to be talking about another shot of retail prices to see what's happening on the consumer side of the meat market. We also get a consumer confidence report next Friday. Those will be the key highlights in terms of what's happening in terms of domestic demand.
All right. As always, thank you very much, Scott.
Have a great weekend, John.
For Scott and for Megan Grebner, I'm John Perkins with Brownfield's Weekly Livestock Market Update.